All right, good morning. I'm Leo and I'm a recovered alcoholic. I want to welcome everybody to today's Big Book study. Rob will not be joining us today. He is in Tennessee with family. And so we have our very own Bill from New Jersey that's going to be assisting today. We start this off with the third step prayer. I'll go ahead and do that. It's on page 63 if you'd like to follow along. God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. Okay. All right. So we are starting a new chapter, chapter 11 on page 151, A Vision for You. And this is where I like to call the chapter of hope. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started, Bill.
Okay, page 151, chapter 11, A Vision for You. For most normal folks, drinking means conviviality, companionship, and colorful imagination. It means release from care, boredom, and worry. It is joyous intimacy with friends and a feeling that life is good. But not so with us in those last days of heavy drinking. The old pleasures was gone. They were but memories. Never could we recapture the great moments of the past. There was an insistent yearning to enjoy life as we once did, and a heartbreaking obsession that some new miracle of control would enable us to do it. There was always one more attempt and one more failure.
Yeah, those were the days of conviviality, companionship, and colorful imagination. The release that alcohol provided us early on in our lives was pretty amazing. It was obviously something that we had some level of control over, even if we were going down the path of no control. But we were now and are now at that point where we can't recapture those great moments of the past. And it's just the obsession that we talk about. One of the obsessions that plagues us is that somehow, someday, we're going to be able to drink like normal people and control our drinking. As I say, if you control your drinking, you're not having fun. And if you're having fun, you're not controlling your drinking as far as we're concerned. And those multiple attempts and multiple failures, we're at that point where we've kind of, we've been defeated more times than we care to admit. And problem is that it just snowballs, and it's not something that we can do ever again as alcoholics. Bill?
Yeah, I just mentioned, it says here that what we got from drinking was release from care, boredom, and worry. Did alcohol do that for you? I know it did it for me. We're on the next paragraph. The less people tolerated us, the more we withdrew from society, from life itself. As we became subjects of King Alcohol, shivering denizens of his mad realm, the chilling vapor that is loneliness settled down. It thickened, ever becoming blacker. Some of us sought out sordid places, hoping to find understanding, companionship, and approval. Momentarily we did. Then would come oblivion and the awful awakening to face the hideous four horsemen: terror, bewilderment, frustration, despair. Unhappy drinkers who read this page will understand.
And certainly do understand. The less people tolerated us, the more we withdrew. I know our very own Rob would talk about going to his basement, which he normally is in whenever we're having this meeting. But nonetheless, he would just go down there by himself and drink until he was gone. I myself found myself, sneaking alcohol and hiding it in the garage, and without, well, I thought nobody knew. I would go out and get a drink and try to continue on, but I was in my own isolation in that I wasn't sharing my drinking. I wasn't sharing the moments. I wasn't having that, that good companionship that comes with normal drinkers. And I too was one that withdrew from life and found myself drinking by myself more times than I care to admit. It is a lonely place. It's singular. It is a place that is cold and dark, and it isn't any fun at all. And a few of us would go out. We would find an old bar or watering hole and try to find some folks that were like-minded and try to drink with them. But then again, that out of control drinking normally got us into some level of trouble, and we were faced again. And I think this is worth noting. I've underlined them: the Four Horsemen, terror, obviously looking around and realizing that things are out of control, bewilderment, and how we can't control our drinking. Why is that? What is going on? The frustration that sets in because of that, and I trying our darndest to drink like normal people, and then that kind of very lonely place of despair and just kind of defeated capacity. And certainly that made us unhappy. Absolutely. Bill? Okay.
Notice King Alcohol is in capital letters. I think Bill's trying to get the point across. At one time, that was our higher power. Okay, the next paragraph. Now and then, a serious drinker being dry at the moment says, I don't miss it at all. Feel better, work better, having a better time. As ex-problem drinkers, we smile at such a sally. We know our friend is like a boy whistling in the dark to keep up his spirits. He fools himself. Inwardly, he would give anything to take a half a dozen drinks and get away with them. He will presently try the old game again, for he isn't happy about his sobriety. He cannot picture life without alcohol. Someday he will be unable to imagine life either with alcohol or without it. Then he will know loneliness such as few do. He will be at the jumping off place. He will wish for the end.
So this is, we talk about the despair, the being dry for a period of time, whether that be a couple of weeks or a month, maybe. A lot of times I find that this group of folks that are in this capacity, we normally kind of talk about as dry drunks, or those that are white knuckling it. And obviously, as being a dry drunk or white knuckling it, you're still fantasizing about the next round of drinks and hoping that you're going to be able to get to those drinks at some point in time. In fact, you're kind of consumed by it. And it is that point where you haven't really jumped into the steps. You haven't found your higher power, nor have you even admitted at that point that you're willing to believe. But it is a very frustrating time. And but there is this face or mask that you put on, and it is one that is you outwardly look as if you're happy that you've licked it, that you've beat it, and you want people to know. I remember after my being a 2-week wonder in the beginning, I was upset that people hadn't forgiven me for all of my transgressions up at that point, because after all, I've got 2 weeks of sobriety. I've done lick this. But at that point in time, I have to admit that I was still thinking about my next drink and when it was going to happen, even if I wasn't willing to admit it. The point is that this gets you into one of those places where you look around, there's that frustration, the despair, you're inward. You're very, very lonely, and it is something that a lot of people don't experience. And we talk about this in the point of being, the paths that you can take. Obviously, there's some seriousness to this, and he will be at the jumping off place. Just as a reference here is he will wish for the end, and that's obviously thinking in terms of suicide, or obviously drinking yourself to death. Certainly does happen, and we want that to not happen, obviously. So, Bill?
Yeah. Like Leo said, this here is talking about somebody that's white knuckling it. They're dry. They're really not sober yet, even though they're not drinking. And you can ask yourself, did this happen to me? Did I experience this? A lot of us go through this in the first few days when we first get sober, because we're really not sure what's going on, or where we want to be, or whatever. All right, let me go on to the first new paragraph on page 152. We have shown how we have got out from under. You say, yes, I am willing, but am I to be consigned to a life where I shall be stupid, boring, and glum, like some righteous people I see? I know I must get along without liquor, but how can I? Have you a sufficient substitute?
So, a lot of hard questions to ask, and obviously, we know today of what the answers are, and know to the beginning, you're not to be consigned to a life where you'd be stupid, boring, or glum. Obviously, if we're not having any fun, why would you want to go down this path? And I'm not saying that it's fun all the time. I'm just saying that it is not a glum type of time. Now, you're going to feel bad. You're going to feel sorry for yourself. You're going to still experience some loneliness with it. After all, this is this does require a lot of work. And while there are people there to support you and to help you through that, a lot of things that have to be done by the individual person yourself. And at this point, they're also asking questions, as well as making some statements, and knowing that you have to be without alcohol. But how can I? And that's what this book is about, and that's what we're trying to answer. And we'll kind of get into that as we go forward. Bill?
Okay, the next paragraph. Yes, there is a substitute, and it is vastly more than that. It is a fellowship in Alcoholics Anonymous. There you will find release from care, boredom, and worry. Your imagination will be fired. Life will mean something at last. The most satisfactory years of your existence lie ahead. Thus we find the fellowship, and so will you.
Yeah, this is what is good about the fellowship. It's the like-mindedness. It's the I've been there and done that alongside you. I know where you're coming from. I know where you're going kind of kinship that comes with the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. And we all have found that with a group of people through AA. And the good news is that, you can tell your story and somebody has a similar story. You can you can hear somebody else's story and draw from that and go, that sort of happened to me, or that exact thing happened to me, that type of thing. But the point being is that you're with like-minded people, and they're there to help and support. And I think that this is absolutely true. It doesn't seem like it in the beginning, but I will say that the most satisfactory years of your existence lie ahead. I have to admit to myself on occasion, and it's used to be more often than it is now, but it isn't that I don't admit it. It's just that I believe it. And that is that things are better because of my not drinking. And I look at things when I'm, in some type of something that's not going quite well, or that isn't perfect or near perfect, et cetera, et cetera. And I think to myself, oh my gosh, if I was drinking, how much worse would this be? And I know that to be a fact. And so I'm able to call on a couple of folks that I rely on and talk through some things. And the good news is that I feel a lot better after the fact instead of worse, which I would have if I was drinking. And certainly it is true. It's the most satisfactory years of your existence lie ahead. Bill?
Yeah, they asked us in the previous paragraph, do we have a substitute for liquor? And now he's telling us, yes, there is a substitute. It's a fellowship in Alcoholics Anonymous. And what do we get from that? We get release from care, boredom, and worry. That's the same thing it talked about on the top of page 151. From drinking, we get release from care, boredom, and worry. So we can use AA as a substitute for our drinking. Okay, then the next paragraph. How is that to come about, you ask? Where am I to find these people? And I'll keep on going. You are going to meet these new friends in your own community. Near you, alcoholics are dying helplessly like people in a sinking ship. If you live in a large place, there are hundreds, high and low, rich and poor. These are future fellows of Alcoholics Anonymous. Among them, you will make lifelong friends. You will be bound to them with new and wonderful ties. For you will escape disaster together, and you will commence shoulder to shoulder your common journey. Then you will know what it means to give of yourself that others may survive and rediscover life. You will learn the full meaning of love thy neighbor as thyself.
Yeah. How is this to come about? It is to get out and be a part of AA, be a part of the fellowship, find some good book-based fellowships. I believe that to be better than the fellowships that we know that do mostly discussions about their week and how bad things have been and how they've been coping with them and that type of thing. It's good to hear that on occasion because there is some relatability to that, but at the same time, that I have found for myself doesn't get me sober. It just is a period of time that I'm listening to somebody else's week and have that unfold in front of me. What I'm talking about is something that is big book based, something that is really getting into the book and is describing the program and working through the steps and helping others do the same. And we are referencing your step 12, and that is to get out and not only find the assistance and the support that you're going to find in the fellowship, but also to provide that assistance and support. And it is true. We come from all walks of life. We are of socioeconomic differences with us. All of that seems to be put aside when we're in AA. And we are in the process of making lifelong friends. Usually out of a group of, say, 20 people that you regularly see, I'm sure that at least one or two are good friends that you regularly count on, and they count on you. And that's what is meant by that. And this is something that is of a bond. It is this bond that you have of a like background in the sense that both were alcoholics and have had the trials and tribulations of being that. And now you are, and I've underlined this, shoulder to shoulder with your common journey of being alcohol-free and recovered. Rob? I'm sorry, Bill?
Yeah, like Leo mentioned, shoulder to shoulder. That means we're equal. We're not walking one behind the other. We're not all following each other around. We walk shoulder to shoulder because we're all equal. We're all sober in AA. We're equal, and that's that. And okay, the first new paragraph on page 153. It may seem incredible that these men are to become happy, respected, and useful once more. How can they rise out of such misery, bad repute, and hopelessness? The practical answer is that since these things have happened among us, they can happen with you. Should you wish them above all else and be willing to make use of our experience, we are sure they will come. The age of miracles is still with us. Our own recovery proves that.
It certainly does. And I've made a note out here. It's a statement that is made by one of the folks of the Keystone Group that I'm a part of, and that is that you've got to get on the bus. You have to take that first step and get on the bus to recovery, and that's what we're talking about here. And you know, there is happiness and respectability in store for you, and this usefulness. You know, some people become more useful than they were. Other people become useful when they weren't. But the fact is, the absence of alcohol and the recovery effort that you put in is one that turns the tide, and you become a very useful person in society. The Age of Miracles is still with us. I think it is a miracle. It's amazing as to digging deep and that inner strength that you have to tap into to find that higher power, and then let go of it and let things happen. My famous saying is, leap and the net will appear. It's gotta, you have to have some faith and belief in things in order to be able to get there. So you have to be willing to believe and have that belief, and then faith comes out after. And there are thousands upon thousands of people who have recovered using this program, and that gets proven over and over and over again. And every time that somebody recovers, I would tell you that there's no small feat, and is certainly a miracle. Bill?
Yeah, I think what Bill's doing here, he's giving hope to the newcomer. He says, because these things happened among us, they can happen with you. So when somebody is new and they're just starting this, and they see that people are already here and that this stuff has happened with them, their lives have turned around and they've got better, they realize that can happen with them too. And this is giving a new person hope. Okay, the next paragraph on page 153. Our hope is that when this chip of a book is launched on the world tide of alcoholism, defeated drinkers will seize upon it to follow its suggestions. Many, we are sure, will rise to their feet and march on. They will approach still other sick ones, and fellowships of Alcoholics Anonymous may spring up in each city and hamlet, haven for those who must find a way out.
You know, and this is really just saying, look, this book has got an answer. It's got the program of AA in it, and following the steps and the program certainly puts you in a good place for recovery. And at the time that this book was written, there was still, you know, many will rise to their feet and march on. A lot of people, surprisingly enough, were able to get sober just by the book alone, without any real assistance or support. It should be noted that we have a lot of the support that's out there today, and there's a lot more people that understand the book much better than even back then. And I would just say that I don't know that I could have done it by myself with just this book, but I do know that it wasn't until I got into this book and truly started learning as to what the program was that I didn't find myself finally starting to recover. And these groups, these fellowships, you know, they're all over the place now. Some of them are as small as 3 or 4 people. Others are as big as literally hundreds of people that are in the meeting. And I've been in a couple of them that were very large meetings. They all have their own personality, and it's interesting to be in a large group and in different groups. There's sometimes it's a men's group or a women's group. Others are just a profession based off of what you do for a living and stuff that they create groups for. And I've been a part of one of those as well, that I was a part of. But bottom line is that to seize upon it and follow its suggestions. The book has really got the program in it, and finding like-minded people to help and support both to help and to get help is an important thing. Bill?
Okay, the next paragraph. In the chapter, Working with Others, you gather an idea of how we approach and aid others to health. Suppose now that through you, several families have adopted this way of life. You will want to know more of how to proceed from that point. Perhaps the best way of treating you to a glimpse of your future will be to describe the growth of the fellowship among us. Here is a brief account.
Bill will go ahead and just keep going on this one.
Okay. Years ago, in 1935, one of our number made a journey to a certain western city. From a business standpoint, his trip came off badly. Had he been successful in his enterprise, he would have been set on his feet financially, which at the time seemed vitally important. But his venture wound up in a lawsuit and bogged down completely. The proceeding was shot through with much hard feelings and controversy.
Yeah, so what we're talking about here is talking about working with others. So it's a reference that Bill makes to our step 12 and the importance of that working with another person ensures immunity from drinking. And I have experienced that myself and can say that for me, that is absolutely 100% true. When we talk about years ago in 1935, one of our number, we're talking about Bill W. And the city in the West is Akron, Ohio. And the company that he was working with was the National Rubber Machine Company. And at the time, certainly, the money was the important thing. And at the same time, this is at a point in time when Bill was still drinking and having problems with it. Actually, I think he had stopped drinking for a period of time, and Bill, you can help me with that. But at this point, that's kind of where we are in telling of this story. Bill?
Yeah, like Leo said, this is a reference to Bill Wilson. He went out to Akron, Ohio, for some kind of a business deal. They were going to take over the National Rubber Machine Company, and Bill had been sober approximately 5 months at this point. And the book says 6 months, but actually it was only 5 months he was sober. And he would have been set on his feet financially. Somebody figured out how much money he would have been paid if he would have been the president of this company. And in his mind, when they took over this company, he was going to be the president. It would be the equivalent of somewhere north of $200,000 in today's money, plus whatever kind of benefits and perks he got, stock options or whatever. So he would have had a good deal going there, and Bill would have been set for life, basically, if he would have taken over it. But unfortunately, or maybe fortunately for us, the whole deal fell through. All right, let me continue on this page. The first new paragraph on page 154. Bitterly discouraged, he found himself in a strange place, discredited and almost broke. Still physically weak and sober but a few months, he saw that his predicament was dangerous. He wanted so much to talk with someone, but whom? Want me to keep going?
Yep.
Okay. One dismal afternoon, he paced the hotel lobby, wondering how his bill was to be paid. At one end of the room stood a glass-covered directory of local churches. Down the lobby, a door opened to an attractive bar. He could see the gay crowd inside. In there, he would find companionship and release. Unless he took some drinks, he might not have the courage to scrape up an acquaintance and would have a lonely weekend.
So what we're basically doing is that the business deal fell through, and Bill is at one of those weak moments at this point in time where he's got a decision to make. He's got choices here. He's in a strange place, discredited and almost broke. In fact, I think he only had about $10 in his pocket. He was still weak and sober, but just a few months. So he was still rather raw in his sobriety, and obviously he is at least aware of the fact that he is in one of those places where it could go one way or the other. He wanted to talk to somebody, but at that point in time, he wasn't sure. He was given a choice with the directory that we now know of that he did in fact go with. He looked back and forth to the bar a few times, but finally decided to call up one of the churches and talk to the clergy and start that path of what we now know of was a meeting with Bob. Dr. Bob. So we'll get into that a little bit more here, but that's kind of where we are. It's that, that tipping point. And we've been there, and I talk about this in that, it could go either way. And I know that I've been faced with those choices, and very, very early on in my attempts to get sober, I can tell you that I made the wrong decision and decided to drink instead of not drink. But at the same time, at that time, I wasn't, tapping into my higher power, and things weren't going the way that they do today. And I wasn't strong enough in my own abilities to resist the alcohol. So it wasn't until after I found my higher power, until after I let go and turned things over to a large extent, and found that I was then able to move on and recover. Bill?
Yeah, this could be a turning point in AA's history. I mean, Bill is at that point where he's standing there and he's not sure which way to go, whether he's going to go into the bar or to the church directory. Thank God, if he would have went into the bar, who knows what would have ever happened. Okay, let me continue here. Of course, he couldn't drink. Well, why not sit hopefully at a table, a bottle of ginger ale before him? After all, had he not been sober 6 months now, perhaps he could handle, say, 3 drinks, no more. Fear gripped him. He was on thin ice. Again, it was the old insidious insanity, that first drink. With a shiver, he turned away and walked down the lobby to the church directory. Music and gay chatter still floated to him from the bar.
Yeah, and you can kind of think in terms of having an angel on one shoulder and a devil on the other shoulder, whispering in your ears one way or the other, and that the decisions that could be made. He was sober, and he could handle, say, 3 drinks, no more. The obsession is gripping him. This obsession that somehow, some way, you're going to be able to drink like others is upon him, and he is struggling with that mightily. Maybe just getting a ginger ale, a non-alcoholic drink, and mixing with people that are drinking. I know that I've been in a situation like that. And the next thing I know, I found myself, ordering an actual drink and then trying to hide it as being either a 7-Up or ginger ale or something to that effect, and found myself drinking once again. And thinking that somehow I was going to be able to control it, and yet I didn't. He does recognize the lie, and I'm going to call it the big lie here, and actually turns away and walks down the lobby to the church directory, which we've heard the story, so we'll keep going on it. But the struggle that he must have felt in that moment when he did in fact decide to walk down the aisle to the church directory. Bill?
Yeah, this is like really an important part of the beginning of AA. He decided to go to the church directory, and a lot of people think that's symbolic of divine intervention. Notice it doesn't say he went and he looked in the phone book and just looked up the phone number. He went to the church directory, and he was still standing outside the bar looking in and deciding what to do. He figured, I got 6 months now. Maybe I can handle 3 drinks. Does anybody identify with that? I got 6 months of sobriety. I got this. 2 or 3 drinks won't hurt me anymore. Yeah, that's right where Bill was. It was right at that point. Okay, let's go on to the last paragraph on page 154. But what about his responsibilities? His family, and the men who had died because they would not know how to get well. Ah, yes, those other alcoholics. There must be many in this town. He would phone a clergyman. His sanity returned, and he thanked God. Selecting a church at random from the directory, he stepped into the booth and lifted the receiver.
Wow.
Want me to continue?
Yeah, we'll go ahead and continue. Yep.
Okay. His call to the clergyman led him presently to a certain resident of the town who, though formerly able and respected, was then nearing the nadir of alcoholic despair. It was the usual situation: home in jeopardy, wife ill, children distracted, bills in arrears, and standing damage. He had a desperate desire to stop, but saw no way out, for he had earnestly tried many avenues of escape. Painfully aware of being somehow abnormal, the man did not fully realize what it meant to be alcoholic.
All right. So what about his responsibilities, his family, and the men who would die because they would not know how to get well, those other alcoholics? This is a little bit of foretelling of what this is to become. He did phone the clergy. We talked, this person that he called was Reverend Walter Tunks, and it just happened that Walter Tunks had got him in touch with Henrietta Seiberling, and she's the one that got him, Bill, in touch with Dr. Bob, known as Dr. Robert Smith, also known as Bob S., and his wife, Ann Smith. So this is the beginning of AA, as we have defined and determined that this is when AA really got started. But I think it's important to note they put him in touch with somebody that was far gone. Dr. Bob was at his wit's end. His practice was failing. He was of little or no use to his family, and that was causing a lot of problems. And they decided that maybe the two of them could get together and talk. So this is another point that we want to make here, and that is Dr. Bob, as we've heard before, didn't know what it was to be alcoholic, even though he was a doctor and had medical definitions, if you will. They still didn't know what it was to be alcoholic, and this is where certainly Bill is going to come in and be able to help Dr. Bob with. Bill?
Yeah, there's some real good information here on all the beginnings here of how AA started. You know, it says here on the bottom of page 154, well, what about those other alcoholics? In other words, Bill was starting to think about other people instead of just thinking about himself. And what happened? His sanity returned. That's how your sanity returns. That's how you get better, by thinking about other people instead of just thinking about yourself. And then he says he thanked God. So that could be another instance of some type of divine intervention. Then what he did, he got in touch with this Reverend Tunks. Reverend Tunks gave him a bunch of phone numbers. He called them all up. Finally, he got in touch with Henrietta Seiberling, who got him in touch with, who called Dr. Bob and got Dr. Bob over to her house. And Bill came over there, and that's when they met and they first got together. You know, if you look at all of this stuff that happened, what if some of this stuff would have been a little bit different? What if that deal in Akron that Bill went to, if the deal didn't fall apart? He would have never been pacing the lobby of the hotel, and none of this stuff would have ever happened. What if he would have went into the bar and had 3 drinks? That probably would have been the end of it. We would have never heard of AA. What if when he called up Reverend Tunks wasn't home and he didn't answer the phone, or if he was in the shower or something? And when he gave her all the phone numbers and he finally called up Henrietta, what if Henrietta didn't answer the phone? I mean, there's so many things here that all these little pieces of the puzzle, how they fit together, there had to be something greater than all of us, you know, taking care of all of this stuff. All right, let me go to the second paragraph on page 155. When our friend related his experience, The man agreed that no amount of willpower he might muster could stop his drinking for long. The spiritual experience, he conceded, was absolutely necessary, but the price seemed high upon the basis suggested. He told how he lived in constant worry about those who might find out about his alcoholism. He had, of course, the familiar alcoholic obsession that few knew of his drinking. Why, he argued, should he lose the remainder of his business, only to bring still more suffering to his family by foolishly admitting his plight to the people from whom he made his livelihood. He would do anything he said but that.
Yeah, interestingly enough, we first our friend related his experience. So or Bill, when he went to talk to Dr. Bob, didn't talk about Dr. Bob so much as he talked about himself, and he related his experience to Dr. Bob, which Dr. Bob obviously connected with, and but Dr. Bob, his big concern here was nobody knows I'm a drunk. And I go back to my statement when I made as far as me going out to the garage and getting drinks and thinking nobody knew, and finding out later in reality everybody knew. And I would just say that the people that he thinks that doesn't know that he's a drunk probably already knew it, if that he was in fact. He, of course, the alcoholic obsession that few knew of his drinking, and why he argued should he lose the remainder of his business. This fear gripped him over admitting the fact that he was an alcoholic, and that was a problem for Dr. Bob. And he was afraid that he was going to lose everything if he did admit things, which we obviously find out that that's not the case. In fact, things went in his favor by him opening up and admitting that he was an alcoholic and a drunk to other people. Now, I think it's also worth noting here is that they were only supposed to talk for just a few minutes. That's what Dr. Bob had agreed to. By the time everything was over with, they talked for approximately 6 hours, and that was the beginnings of this lifelong friendship that they had together. Bill?
Yeah, basically this is Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob when they first got together and they first met. And like Leo said, Bill didn't talk about Bob's drinking and that Bob has to stop drinking. Bill talked about Bill's drinking, and Bob could identify with him and see himself through Bill telling Bill's story. That's where your war story belongs when you're on a 12-step call and you're trying to help a newcomer. You tell them what happened to you so that they can identify. And Bob was willing to do everything that Bill said except what we would call step 9. He didn't want to make amends to the people that he needed to do that because he was afraid he would have to admit that he was an alcoholic, and that would destroy the remainder of his business. Dr. Bob was a surgeon. And a surgeon who's an alcoholic is not going to have too many patients because nobody's going to want to go to him. So he wouldn't do step 9, what we call step 9, and he wound up going back out again. All right, the last paragraph on 155. Being intrigued, however, he invited our friend to his home. Sometime later, and just as he thought he was getting control of his liquor situation, he went on a roaring bender. For him, this was the spree that ended all sprees. He saw that he would have to face his problems squarely, that God might give him mastery.
Yep. And so we're talking about Dr. Bob here. Dr. Bob goes to a convention. He actually comes home early because of his drinking and then ultimate sobriety. And 3 days, I don't have the whole story. I'm going to turn it over to Bill for that. But the idea here is that Dr. Bob starts to get sober. He goes on another bender and finds that that's not the answer. And it turns out that that's the last time he does, in fact, drink, and never drinks again for the rest of his life. And part of that is by him turning his will and his way over to the power of a higher power, or God. And so then he starts to succeed with the program of AA. And even though it wasn't as defined at that point, there were some tenets that certainly apply to today. Bill, I'm going to let you kind of hit the highlights of the history of this.
Yeah, Dr. Bob gotten sober originally when Bill talked to him, and then Bill moved in with them. They invited Bill to come and move in with them, and Bill moved in with Dr. Bob and his wife, and Dr. Bob had to go to some kind of a convention in Atlantic City. It was an American Medical Association convention, and when he went there, when he got on the train, he drank all the scotch they had on the train, and he stayed drunk when he got down. And he might have got sober for a little short interval, but he went and he bought more scotch, went up to his room with it and got drunk. And basically, well, what most people believe, it's because he would not make amends. He wouldn't do what we call step 9. So he was missing part of the program. And he came back early because he was so drunk he didn't want to embarrass himself. And there's some controversy on what the dates are when all of this happened. Originally, they believed that he came back and he got sober on June the 10th. That was his sobriety date. And today they claim it was actually June the 17th. Somebody made a mistake by 1 week. They looked at the calendar wrong because somebody did some investigation on this. And when they looked up when this American Medical Association convention was, it started on the 10th, and it went the whole week, that whole week. And the 10th was a Monday, so it went to that Friday. So if Dr. Bob went there, he couldn't have been back in Akron on the 10th. He would have been down there on the 10th. So who knows? All we know is he went there, he got drunk again, he came back, he got sober, and then he stayed sober for the rest of his life. So we could try to piece it together, but there is some different controversy on it. All right, let's go to the first new paragraph on page 156. One morning he took the bull by the horns and set out to tell those he feared what his trouble had been. He found himself surprisingly well received and learned that many knew of his drinking. Stepping into his car, he made the rounds of the people he had hurt. He trembled as he went about, for this might mean ruin, particularly to a person in his line of business.
You know, the interesting part is that this was, it took a while. He did a really good job of going around and spending hours talking to people. And like it says here that he was well received, and most people actually knew of his drinking, as we had thought of before. And essentially what Dr. Bob is essentially doing is going around and talking about his situation. It's kind of, a light step 4 through 9, if you will, with regard to that, and making some amends as he went along. But the big thing here is Dr. Bob, he took action, and that's the important point here. And he stepped out and shared with others what his situation was. And in the end, it was one of the best things that he could have ever done. And certainly after that, he stayed sober from that point on. Bill?
Okay, the next paragraph. At midnight, he came home exhausted, but very happy. He has not had a drink since. As we shall see, he now means a great deal to his community, and the major liabilities of 30 years of hard drinking have been repaired in 4.
Yeah, it took some time. I think that's another point that is good to make here, and that is that it doesn't happen overnight. Now, obviously, you get to that point where you stop drinking and you never drink again. All right, so we've got that. But much like myself, I'm still in the process of being a recovered alcoholic, but there's still work to be done. And what he did was it took him about 4 years to erase 30 years of hard drinking and problems that arose because of that. But it it does take some time. So he has improved his position within the community. The respect is back, his practice is back, and he's doing quite well for that. Bill?
Yeah, I think the point that Bill's trying to get across to us here is you need to do the whole program. You just can't pick and choose and do which steps you want and leave some of them out. And when he went and he did step 9 and he made amends to the people that he hurt, he never had a drink again. And I think that's the point they're trying to get across here. You want to get better, you got to go through this whole program. You just can't pick and choose and do which part of it you think you want to do and not do the other parts of it. Okay, the next paragraph. But life was not easy for the two friends. Plenty of difficulties presented themselves. Both saw they must keep spiritually active. One day they called up the head nurse of a local hospital. They explained their need and inquired if she had a first-class alcoholic prospect. Yes, she replied. She replied, yes, we've got a corker. He's just beaten up a couple of nurses, goes off his head completely when he's drinking, but he's a grand chap when sober, though he's been in here 8 times in the last 6 months. Understand he was once a well-known lawyer in town, but just now we've got him strapped down tight.
There's a bit of humor in the midst of this, the darkness here, but this is Bill Dotson we're talking about here, and the nurse that they contacted was Ms. Hall. And this is back at the time when Bill and Bob and others within Alcoholics Anonymous would seek out hospitals and find really far gone alcoholics. And that was kind of how things got started. They actually got out and looked for people and then qualified them. And they went after some of the worst of the worst as far as alcoholism is concerned. And they weren't always successful. In fact, Bill will tell you the first half dozen people he approached, he was not successful with after Dr. Bob. And in fact, if you look back on things, Dr. Bob was somehow slightly more, if not a little more successful than Bill was in the very beginning. And to this day, there's Dr. Bob is credited with a great many recoveries. But the important thing is here is that they go out, they're searching for real alcoholics. They're confiding and asking the medical staff, and in this case, it was Bill Dotson that they found, and we'll go from there. Bill?
Yeah, it says here in the beginning of this first paragraph, but both saw they must keep spiritually active. They realized they had to keep this process going. They had to carry this message to others. That's how you keep spiritually active, by trying to do work and self-sacrifice for others. And they realized this, and they didn't have any meetings to go to at that time. So what they did, they called up the hospital and they talked to the head nurse in the hospital and asked if they had any drunks that needed some help and that kind of thing. And she hooked them up with this guy, Bill Dotson. And supposedly this nurse said to Dr. Bob when he called up, she said, "You have a way of fixing alcoholics? Have you tried this on yourself?" Because basically everybody knew that Dr. Bob was a drunk. And they had this guy strapped down tight. He was going through the DTs. He was kicking and screaming and beating people. He just beat up a couple of nurses. You know, he didn't even know what he was doing. The guy's flipping out. And what they used to do back then, and they may even still do it today in some places, they strap you down on the bed until you get over the DTs. And that's what they did. They strapped this guy down for a couple of days. All right, let me continue the last paragraph on page 156. Here was a prospect, all right, but by the description, not too promising. The use of spiritual principles in such cases was not so well understood as it is now. But one of the friends said, "Put him in a private room. We'll be down." 2 days later, a future fellow of Alcoholics Anonymous stared glassily at the strangers beside his bed. "Who are you fellows, and why this private room? I've always been in a ward before."
and we'll go ahead and finish this up at this point. Bill, so go ahead and read the next, well, I tell you what, I think there's a couple of important points here. They did get him into his own room. Back in those days, being put into your own room usually was an indication of that you were near the end and there was going to be some privacy and some time alone with your family and friends before the end was there. So obviously, Bill Dodson was a little concerned that he was at his end because he was put in a private room. But what they basically were doing was just essentially getting him to a point where he was sober enough that he was receptive to their approach and connections, and they were able to talk to him one-on-one, as opposed to being in a ward where there were multiple beds, multiple people, and a lot of distractions. So that's part of that. Bill, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it over to you. We'll do a little bit about this, and then we'll do a quick summary, and then we'll stop there for the day.
Okay, it says here, 2 days later, the future fellow of Alcoholics Anonymous stared glassily at the strangers. It took 2 days for them to get down there and be able to talk to this guy because they had him strapped down. And they had to wait until he sobered up enough, until the DTs subsided, that they could go talk to him. Because when somebody's going through the DTs, they're virtually flipping out. They're hallucinating, they're seeing things that aren't there. You've probably heard stories of people seeing pink elephants or giant spiders or cockroaches or all kinds of weird stuff. And that's what this guy was going through. So you can't talk to a person when they're in that kind of a condition. So what they basically did, they had him strapped down and they had to wait for the DTs to subside before Bill and Bob could go down and talk to him. And Bill and Bob went down and talked to him. And like Leo said, he was concerned. He was in a private room because basically they put people in these big wards. You've probably seen pictures of them in the movies. They got 20 beds or whatever all lined up and a whole bunch of people in there. And when they put you in a private room, that usually meant, something was really bad. It was near the end. So this way they could send some kind of a priest or minister in and your family could come in and you could have some privacy. So he got all upset when he was there. But basically, that's how they treat people. And what this whole thing is about, what this whole part of this book is about, Bill is trying to show us how by using step 12, you can stay sober when you can't stay sober by yourself. In other words, Bill was ready to drink. And what did he do? He went and he tried to help another alcoholic. He called up the church directory and he told them that he needed another alcoholic to talk to so he wouldn't have to drink. By doing step 12, by trying to help someone else, that's what kept Bill from drinking. And that's the point he's trying to get across to us here. That's what he's trying to let us know, that when you try to help somebody else stay sober, that's going to do more for keeping you sober than your willpower or your choice or your thinking or your decisions or anything. By trying to help somebody else, that's what makes us spiritually fit. And when you're spiritually fit, you're a lot less likely to pick up a drink. And that's basically what this whole thing is about, what Bill's trying to show us here when he met Dr. Bob, and then when him and Dr. Bob realized they had to stay spiritually fit again by trying to carry the message to someone else. We're not trying to get everybody else sober. If everybody else gets sober, that's a bonus. That's a wonderful thing. We're carrying the message to others because that's what this program tells us to do. We're mandated in step 12 to carry this message to other alcoholics. That's what it says in step 12. And if you want to do what the program says, that's what we have to do. Whether the other person gets it or not, we still get the spiritual benefit out of it. And if the other person gets it, that's a bonus. That's basically what this is about. This part of this whole book here, this chapter, it's telling us how to stay sober by helping somebody else. Okay, thanks a lot for letting me share.
All right, Bill. Thank you for assisting today. It's been wonderful. Rob is out today, as we know, and he'll be back next week. So, Bill, I just wanted to thank you again for stepping in and helping with us in this meeting. So, with that, we'll go ahead and close things out. Bill, do you want to lead us in the Serenity Prayer?
Okay, we'll close with the Serenity Prayer. God, Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference.